Every time a clip of Ben Shapiro gets retweeted on my timeline, I feel myself getting a bit dumber. And I really start to wonder, how is this guy taken seriously as an intellectual? How did this guy make it through Harvard? Now, his most recent take is just so ridiculous. I'm just scratching my head how he came around to it. So basically, Ben Shapiro has said that if Bernie Sanders was politically active during the Second World War, he would be on the side of the Soviet Union. You know, the Soviet Union, who liberated Auschwitz, and, you know, was it like 20 million of their civilians and army died fighting the Russians? So that's a bad thing, apparently. And the same Soviet Union who were given millions and millions of dollars in weapons and food and aid from the United States to fight the Nazis, that Soviet Union? Well, Ben Shapiro clarifies, well, at the start of the war, they signed a non-aggression pact with the Germans to divide up Poland as a buffer state between them. So that kind of forgets to mention that from 1941 to 1945, some of the most brutal fighting of all time was fought between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. So here is the whole clip for you, and then I'm going to dissect it a bit more.
That is Bernie Sanders' agenda. Free everything, paid for presumably by the rich. But the rich don't have the kind of money to pay for $60 trillion worth of spending on what he is talking about. And you can tell what is really animating the Sanders campaign has nothing to do with his plans, has nothing to do with his spending, has nothing to do with where he wants the country to go. What really is animating Bernie Sanders' campaign is hatred for all that is. It's hatred for the quote-unquote status quo. And his surrogates say this. So Michael Moore is a big Bernie Sanders fan. And he's out there saying that we are like the French resistance. See, it's not what Bernie is for that matters. It's what Bernie is against. Bernie is against capitalism. Bernie is against the American system. Bernie is against American history. Bernie is for a complete overthrow of the American system wholesale. And Michael Moore is totally into it. Here's Michael Moore characterizing Bernie Sanders' opposition as basically Nazi-esque and suggesting that Bernie Sanders is the French resistance, which is an amazing statement given the fact that Bernie Sanders, during World War II, if he had been a politically active man at that time, would have been on the side of the USSR, which at the beginning was at least on the side of the Nazis. In any case, that's not to say Bernie Sanders is the Nazi. The point is that to characterize Bernie Sanders' opposition as Nazi-esque and Bernie as a French resistance member is ridiculous on his face.
So Bernie Sanders is against the status quo, right? So how is his opposition anything like the Nazis? And how is it not like the French resistance who were fighting for freedom and freedom from this oppressive force? Isn't that what Bernie Sanders is essentially fighting for? Freedom from oppression. Oppression from the pharmaceutical companies who price gouge on life-saving medicine. You know, oppression from Wall Street. Oppression from the military-industrial complex. Oppression from the American strain of awful capitalism. There's much more in line with that than compared to the Nazis, who their opposition to the Weimar Republic was they wanted to overthrow it, create an authoritarian ethno-state where their whole economy was designed around conquering Europe, enslaving its population, and then butchering millions and millions of ethnic groups. Not to mention, Ben Shapiro is a Jew himself. Does he not know how appalling it is to say that a fellow Jew is acting like a Nazi with his opposition to the American system? Not only that, most of Bernie Sanders' family were killed in the Holocaust. So don't you think that is super problematic? I wonder what Ben Shapiro would say if I said his rhetoric is very Nazi-like. He's essentially a Nazi. I'm sure people would call me out. And he has said problematic things before. He said Bernie Sanders is one of the bad Jews who undermine Israel and undermine Jewish people. And it's a bit disgraceful to say that Bernie Sanders has any characteristics of the Nazis, let alone if you're not exactly calling him a Nazi. Also, I found it quite funny that he lists being against American history as a bad thing. How can you be against history? I don't get that. History happened. You're not pro or for it. I guess what he means is Bernie Sanders is critical of US imperialism throughout the last 200 and so years. And if you're on the right wing, you should just celebrate US imperialism because you can't criticise US history because it's such a great country, it's never done anything bad. I think even most neocons will concede America has done some bad things in its past, whether it's the genocide of the natives, whether it's African slavery. It's just the neocons will debate, you know, they'll start mythicizing the US around the time of World War I with this force for freedom and good and everything. So I don't understand this point about being against history. It just seems like a weird one to me. Also, I want to highlight Ben Shapiro's hypocrisy a bit more. So many of you will know, many of the founders of Israel were actually partisans who fought the Nazis, right? And most of them were from Eastern Europe. Who do you think helped them, and who do you think they allied with during combat? Oh, that's right, a lot of the Jewish partisans fought with the USSR against the Nazis. Maybe you don't want to conveniently leave that out, because then a lot of them then went to Palestine and helped form the state of Israel. Partisans who fought with the Soviet Union created your beloved Israel, a state that you will defend to the death, a state that you basically say has no problems, a state that you will say its actions are completely justified as they oppress another group of people. You call the people they oppress savages who just love to live in sewage and bomb people. Not that they live in awful conditions because of the Israelis. So it just shows that on the surface, because he knows some stuff, he might seem intelligent. But I think people like this just get so confused in their argument. So to end the video, let's just outline what he's saying. So he's saying Bernie Sanders, who's a Jew with most of his family dying in the Holocaust, has a movement that is sort of Nazi in its resistance to Americanism. And of course, if he was active in World War II, he would have been on the side of the Soviets. The Soviets who liberated Europe, the Soviets who committed millions upon millions of their population to defeating the Nazis, the Soviets who armed and funded Jewish partisans fighting the Nazis, the Soviets who fought side by side with Jewish partisans fighting the Nazis, the same partisans who would go on to form the State of Israel. So there you go, Ben. I think you might like the USSR a bit more if you delve a bit deeper into their history. And of course the USSR even backed Israel to begin with before the Cold War started in earnest, when they decided the Western powers have too much influence in Israel, we're going to back the Arab states instead. So Ben Shapiro, fanatical Israeli government supporter, maybe delve a bit deeper into the history of the USSR and the history of the Jewish partisans, and don't label a guy whose family died in the Holocaust as a guy who's using Nazi-like tactics in his opposition to the American Empire. And which I find kind of funny is that America actually inspired the Nazis in many ways. I made a whole video about it. Nazi judges and lawyers came over to America in the 1930s to study the legal code there because it was the most comprehensive racist legal code in the whole world, only being rivaled by the likes of South Africa. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know what you think of Ben Shapiro. Please leave a like, it does help the video out. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Follow me on social media at The Cavanacle on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Be subscribed to my subreddit r/TheCavaнаcle and my personal Reddit account, which is u/TommyCahill1995. Hopefully this is all on screen right now. Check out my Patreon and WordPress in the description, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.